Slavery, a system where people are treated as property, has a long and dark history. It wasn't always about race. In ancient times, people became slaves through war, debt, or crime. Conquered people were often forced into servitude. Slavery existed in many ancient civilizations, including Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, and Rome. These societies relied on slave labor for agriculture, construction, and domestic work. Slaves had no rights and were at the complete mercy of their owners. The transatlantic slave trade marked a horrific chapter in human history. European powers, driven by profit, established large-scale plantations in the Americas. To meet the growing demand for labor, they looked to Africa. This led to the forced transportation of millions of Africans across the Atlantic Ocean in horrific conditions. The journey, known as the Middle Passage, was brutal, with many dying from disease, starvation, or despair. The European colonization of the Americas fueled the transatlantic slave trade. Sugar plantations, especially in the Caribbean, demanded a large workforce. European powers saw Africa as a source of cheap labor. The trade involved a triangular route. European ships brought manufactured goods to Africa, traded them for enslaved Africans, then transported the captives to the Americas. The profits fueled European economies. Conditions on slave ships were appalling. Africans were crammed into tight spaces, often chained together. Disease spread rapidly and mortality rates were high. Those who survived faced a life of forced labor. The arrival of enslaved Africans had a profound impact on the Americas. They brought with them their cultures, traditions, and skills which influenced various aspects of life in the New World. The daily lives of enslaved people were filled with hardship and brutality. They worked long hours, often from sunrise to sunset, under the watchful eyes of overseers. Punishments for minor infractions were severe. Enslaved people had no control over their lives. They were denied education, and families were often torn apart. Despite the hardships, they found ways to resist, both overtly and covertly. Resistance took many forms, from work slowdowns and sabotage to running away and forming communities of escaped slaves, known as maroon communities. These acts of defiance demonstrated their unwavering spirit. The institution of slavery rested on the dehumanization of Africans. Slave codes were enacted to legalize their oppression, defining them as property rather than human beings. This system sought to strip them of their identity and dignity. As the horrors of slavery became more widely known, voices of opposition began to emerge. Abolitionist movements, driven by moral outrage, called for an end to the trade and the institution itself. In Europe and the Americas, individuals and organizations spoke out against slavery. They published newspapers, distributed pamphlets, and held public meetings to raise awareness about the injustices of the system. Abolitionists faced fierce opposition from those who profited from slavery. They were often accused of inciting rebellion and disrupting the social order. However, their unwavering commitment played a crucial role in shifting public opinion. The abolitionist movement gained momentum over time. Religious groups, particularly Quakers, condemned slavery as a sin. Former slaves, such as Frederick Douglass, became powerful voices in the fight for freedom. Section 5. Breaking the Chains. The Civil War and Emancipation. In the United States, the issue of slavery became increasingly divisive, ultimately leading to the Civil War. The Southern states, heavily reliant on slave labor, seceded from the Union, sparking a bloody conflict. The Civil War was a turning point in the fight against slavery. As the war raged on, President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring that all slaves in Confederate-held territory would be freed. The Emancipation Proclamation was a powerful symbol, shifting the focus of the war to the abolition of slavery. It also paved the way for the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which officially abolished slavery in the United States. The end of the Civil War marked a significant victory for the abolitionist movement. However, the struggle for equality and justice for African Americans continued in the face of ongoing discrimination and segregation. Section 6. Leading the Way: Abolitionists and Their Impact. The fight against slavery was led by countless individuals who risked their lives and reputations to fight for justice. These abolitionists came from all walks of life, united in their belief that slavery was a moral abomination. Harriet Tubman, a conductor on the Underground Railroad, made numerous dangerous journeys to guide enslaved people to freedom in the North. Her courage and determination made her an icon of the abolitionist movement. Frederick Douglass, a former slave who became a renowned orator and writer, used his powerful voice to expose the horrors of slavery and advocate for equality. His autobiography remains a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Sojourner Truth, a former slave who became a passionate advocate for abolition and women's rights, challenged audiences with her powerful speeches and unwavering belief in the inherent equality of all people. Section 7. The Shadow of Slavery. Lasting Effects on Society. The legacy of slavery continues to cast a long shadow on societies around the world. The systematic dehumanization and exploitation of enslaved people have had profound and lasting consequences. The economic disparities, racial prejudices, and social injustices that persist in many countries are rooted in the history of slavery. Addressing these issues requires acknowledging the past and its impact on the present. The fight for racial equality and social justice is an ongoing process. Movements like Black Lives Matter highlight the continued struggle against systemic racism and police brutality, issues that have their roots in slavery. Understanding the history of slavery is crucial for building a more just and equitable future. By learning from the past, we can work towards dismantling the structures of oppression that continue to affect marginalized communities. Section 8. The Unfinished Struggle, Fighting Modern Forms of Slavery. While slavery may be illegal in most parts of the world, millions of people are still trapped in various forms of modern-day slavery, including forced labor, human trafficking, and debt bondage. These exploitative practices thrive in the shadows, often hidden from public view. Vulnerable populations such as migrants, refugees, and those living in poverty are particularly susceptible to exploitation. International organizations, governments, and individuals must work together to combat modern-day slavery. Raising awareness, strengthening law enforcement, and supporting victims are crucial steps in eradicating these injustices. The fight against slavery is far from over. By acknowledging the ongoing struggle and taking action, we can strive to create a world where all people are free from exploitation and oppression. Section 9. Remembering the past, shaping the future. Remembering the history of slavery is not about dwelling on the past, but about understanding its profound impact on the present. By confronting the uncomfortable truths of history, we can learn from past mistakes and work towards a better future. Educating future generations about the horrors of slavery is essential. By teaching empathy, understanding, and a commitment to justice, we can empower them to challenge injustice and create a more equitable world. Remembering the resilience and resistance of enslaved people is equally important. Their stories of courage, determination, and the fight for freedom serve as an inspiration for us to continue the struggle for equality and justice. The history of slavery is a stark reminder of the dangers of prejudice, discrimination, and the abuse of power. By learning from the past, we can work towards a future where all people are treated with dignity and respect.